All right.
Okay, there we go. Fantastic. We're live. I love being live. All right, everybody, thank you for joining us and welcome to Findmypast. So we're here with Paul Milner today to talk about Parish Records. This is going to be a really exciting discussion. I have been looking forward to this for several weeks now. We're just going to give it a minute or two and make sure that people are watching and everybody is caught up on the live stream. So please post in the comments who you are, where you're from, what your questions are for Paul. And as the conversation continues, we will work to answer all those questions. So my name is Jen Baldwin. I'm the data acquisition manager for North America for Findmypast. And I have had the pleasure of knowing Paul for, gosh, several years now, I guess.
Yeah.
And so this is exciting. So let me introduce Paul and then we'll just let him start talking because he's really smart. So Paul, I'm trying to remember the first time we met, actually. Paul, welcome to Findmypast Live.
Thank you for the invitation. And I suspect it was at an FGS conference, but I don't know which one.
Yeah, I have no idea which one. So Paul is a native of Northern England, a professional genealogist and internationally known lecturer with more than 30 years experience specializing in British Isles research. When you go to one of Paul's lectures, you know you are going to get an hour's worth of incredible content. I typically can't write my notes fast enough when I listen to Paul, which is why I watch all of his webinars so that I can pause them when I need. So Paul has been lecturing for over 35 years, holds advanced degrees in theology, and is particularly knowledgeable about the church and its role in record keeping, which of course is essential to British and Irish research. As a genealogist, he speaks on a variety of topics relating to research in the British Isles, migration in North America, and research methodology. He's also the 2018 recipient of the Utah Genealogical Society Fellow Award. Welcome, Paul.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. And for those listening, I now live in the US and have been here long enough that I've lost most of my accent.
Not quite all of it.
Not quite all of it. Not quite all of it. So for those trying to figure out where it's from about 30 miles south of the Scottish border on the West Cumbrian coast. Born in Whitehaven, grew up in Workington, for those of you from that area.
And we've got a handful of people now chiming in. Gloria's with us from Australia. Welcome, Gloria. Maureen from London. Linda's with us. I'm just expanding this so I can see everybody. Yeah, my comments thread is not cooperating with me. So for all of you who have said hello, thank you very much for joining us. Paul says it's hot and humid in Northampton. I understand it's incredibly hot in England this week. I feel bad for all of my colleagues. None of them have air conditioning. So I'm sorry for everybody that's in England right now. It's apparently quite a week in terms of the weather over there. So let me see if I can turn comments on. There we go. Susan and Vicky are with us. Thank you very much for watching. Tony's chiming in from Miami. That's wonderful. Diane from California. Julian's in London. Let's see, who did I miss here? Patricia's with us this morning. Oh yeah, it's morning my time. Remember you guys, I'm in Mountain Time Zone. Paul's in Central, so Chicago area. We know it's afternoon for most of you. Amanda's from Hastings. Oh, Liz in Canada. That's great. Good to see you, Liz. And Patricia in Ontario. That's great. Yay. A very diverse group today. That's wonderful. We've got Cheryl from North Wales. I'm glad you specified, Cheryl, because I would never be able to pronounce that location. I know Ellie can. And Ellie is with us in the comments. So she'll be saying hello and messaging as well. So we've got quite a group today. And we're going to talk about parish records. And this is, I will admit, an area that I haven't spent a lot of time in. I know I need to, but I haven't yet. So Paul, we're going to start really open-ended. And remember, for everybody watching, we welcome your comments and your questions. So if you have questions for Paul, please take advantage of this hour together. Paul, just tell us a little bit What is a parish chest, and why is it important to genealogists? Why do we care about these boxes sitting in churches?
Why do we care? Well, the problem with genealogists is we tend to focus on the registers, the baptisms, the marriages, and the burials, the church in its religious capacity. And we forget often about the church in its political, its civil function. And that's what the parish chest is for. Now, at least that's the way it's categorized now. Originally, the parish chest was in effect the safe for the church, the parish church. And it was generally a big, heavy oak box with multiple locks. In theory, no one person had all the locks to get into it. And into that went anything important from the parish. That would include the parish silver, the vestments, the registers, and all of the other documents produced by the parish. Now, let's talk a little bit about what those other things cover so that we can get a sense of why you want to look in here. Well, you want to track the money. So you've got the overseer's accounts and the church warden accounts. That's money coming in and money going out. You've got settlement records, bastardy records, constable accounts, militia lists, miscellaneous documents, charities, what else? Anything you can think of is likely to be in there that was involved in the parish. And why it's so important is it doesn't matter what level of society in the parish your ancestor was, because the poor were on the receiving end of benefits. The middle class, the tradesmen, the well-to-do farmers were the operators of the system. They ran the system, so they're going to be in the records. And if your ancestor was Lord Muckety Muck, that they were contributing the money. So they're all going to be in these records. And that's why everybody needs to look for them to find out where their ancestors are in records.
I love the concept of following the money. I mean, I think about that in so many other contexts. And in fact, I even use it in my own lectures and research, right? When you're thinking about occupation or, looking at a census record in the US and saying, oh, he was worth $60,000 in 1850. Well, what in the heck happened there? Follow the money, right? But the idea of following the parish money, I don't think had ever really kicked in for me. So that's just a really good line, I think. Reinforces the importance of all the various documents that might be found in a parish chest.
Yes. And the nice thing is they cover the full time range. You could have records here, ending in the early 1900s, and yet they could easily go back to the early 1500s. Now, what has survived for every parish is going to be up to the
So I was reading a little bit about all this before we started, obviously, and noted that the first version of a chest was just like, basically a giant log that they carved out a hole in and kind of roughly chopped up into the shape of a box as early as 13th century, right? According to one book.
They were required in the 1500s. There was some laws introduced in the 1500s that required them. And they could be shaped like a coffin. They could be like a steamer trunk. But the big requirement would be solid, heavy, with multiple locks. And you will often find those still in the churches when you visit. Now, they may be used as a coffee table. They may be used for storage. They won't be used as a safe anymore.
Yeah, I saw something online that they were telling about going into kind of an abandoned parish, and they had found one. And I think it was like in the 60s or 70s that this happened. And it was filled with kids' toys because the neighborhood kids would use the parish to play in on rainy days when they couldn't play outside. So it was a beautiful chest, but it was, you know, falling apart, and it was full of all the toys from the local kids. Yeah. Yeah, fantastic. So tell us a little bit about, I mean, and maybe you have some anecdotes or something you want to share about. Do you have any kind of your own personal like favorite research story when it comes to parish chest type records?
Personally, my favorite document was a one-page settlement examination, and this is for the parish of Leeds in Kent, which is just outside of Maidstone. This is 1835, and it's a copy from an examination being held in Chatham, which is up on the north coast of Kent. And it tells me that he is a Royal Marine in the Chatham Division of the Marines. And I'm thinking, so that led me to tracing his career, and I'm still tracing his career. It's great. But so I've been working from this document for years, but that was the clue that set me on the journey. And then you've got to realize, okay, what happened here? Because I eventually figured out he'd already been in the Royal Marines 10 years by the time this was created. So why be examined?
Yeah.
What had changed? And what had changed was he got married. And when he got married, his wife's place of legal settlement was that of her husband. And if he now went away to sea and didn't return, then she became became the responsibility of his parish, even though she probably never had been there.
Right.
And the reason this was in their parish chest was this was the copy that was sent to them to say, she's now yours to take care of if he doesn't come back. And consequently, it gave me the date and place of the marriage, approximate date of the marriage, the place of the marriage. And that led me into the marriage records. And this was long before the church in Rochester had been indexed. But what that led me to was his service in the Royal Marines, his service in the 23rd Regiment of Foot. So he had 10 years in the Army, over 20 years in the Navy, in the Royal Marines, and then he ended up with a long service medal, which in those days was a competitive thing. It wasn't, oh, you've done your time, get a gold watch at the end of it. It wasn't like that at all. And the Navy didn't keep track of who got it. So that was found because of a letter of correspondence from the Navy board to his commanding officer saying he should get it. And they had a copy of the letter in the Admiralty records. So it's taken me 15 years of research to follow his career.
No, I mean, no amount of time at all. Very insignificant.
That's right.
Okay, so a couple questions coming in. So we're going to read off a few of these. Tony, do many churches still have these chests and these records, or have the records been moved to a central location?
Okay. The churches, the parishes will often still have the physical wooden, generally wooden, occasionally metal, wooden chests. They don't have the contents still in them. all of those records have been generally moved to the county or the diocesan archives. It varies depending on the part of the country. And in some areas of the country, that's the diocese and the county archives are the same place. In others, like Durham, they're not. So from a British perspective, the best thing to do is contact or look at the catalog of the county or diocesan archives to see where the records are, to see what has survived. They may be organized by parish, or some of the records may have been gathered into collections to be organized by the county or diocese, such as settlement records, which have a bigger area. Keep in mind, many of these records there are multiple copies of these records generated in some cases, like settlement examinations, bastardy records. There may be multiple copies, and so you want an index that's going to pick up where the extra copy went to. So don't just look at your parish, look at the neighboring parishes that may have had connections with your ancestors. If you're not within location of the county archives, then look to see what has been microfilmed and then now digitized by the Family Search, the Family History Library, because that way you can access many of the records from all over the world.
Yeah, and I noted on their catalog, on Family Search, they're typically categorized just under church records. So when you look through the Family Search catalog and you're looking in a particular county, that's the terminology you want to look for is church records. There's no distinction between like parish chest or anything. It doesn't specify parish chest records. It just says church records.
But if you go to church records, there will often be a separate item for the parish chest filmings. Yeah, to show that it's different.
And some are available on a variety of sites. Findmypast has a couple collections. Other sites in the genealogy space have a couple of collections. But Family Search catalog and their wiki is a great place to start for any of this.
Yep.
Okay, great. An interesting question from Mobo, and hopefully I pronounced that right. What right do we have to request access to these records?
They're just like the parish registers, they're generally freely available because most of them are going to be pre-World War I. So they're going to be over 100 years old. So you don't necessarily have to worry so much about the privacy issues. Mm-hmm. If you come more up to the more recent times, actually most of the parish in its civil capacity, most of that disappeared under the municipal acts in the 1880s, and became a lot of those responsibilities for government functions were taken away and given to the local county councils or municipal councils. So those functions were taken away. Yeah, so they're going to be out of privacy worries.
Right. Yeah, for sure. So in terms of, like, for example, the Roman Catholic Church in North America is pretty restrictive on who can access certain records in certain locations. There doesn't seem to be any tendency from the Church of England in that sense, in terms of just keeping people out.
Right. And since most of the Church of England records, at least, have been gathered into archives, the old material has been gathered into archives rather than still being in the possession of the parish in most cases. Like with the Roman Catholics, where the parish may still have the original 1830s record parish registers,
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So quick hello to a few more people that have joined us. Linda, Said she was late. She forgot what day it was. It's totally okay, Linda. You can join us. Enid's here with us. She's got a question I'm going to ask in a second. Audrey Collins is in the house today.
All right. Welcome, Audrey.
A good friend to Findmypast and really everybody in genealogy. Right. So Enid, her question is, are these chests only in England or only Church of England? Does the Episcopal churches have them?
That's the Church of England is Episcopal. These are the chests in its, because the records are for the church in its civil capacity. This is going to be in England and Wales. Scotland has a different governance system, so that those records are generally going to be in the Kirk Session records. I think in some cases, you may find some of the materials in Ireland, but not to the extent that you're going to get in England, because it's a different governing system there. But there is some overlap. But again, it's because of the Episcopal Church. But yes, you're going to find them in England and Wales.
Yeah. Mia Bennett is also with us. She says hello.
All right. All my friends are joining today.
It's lovely. It's a great way to see people, actually.
Yes.
Maria is with us from Suffolk, and Kate it's her first time watching, actually, so thanks for joining us, Kate. Victoria is with us. Linda Kirk is with us. So yeah, lots of great people and good comments and questions and conversation happening on the thread. So keep it going, everybody. It's always fun to see. So Ellen Maria is asking just kind of basically where can she find parish chest records, which we've kind of already talked about, but she asks, or she says, all I can come up with is maps. Is there any particular reason why a particular diocese or county or area would be predominant in one type of record and nothing else?
I certainly wouldn't expect maps to be the dominant record. That is, there are some maps in the parish chest. They're more likely to be things like changing the roads, where you're cutting across people's property, and so they'll draw a map, or they're modifying a bridge, because those are parish responsibilities. You may have some estate maps showing parish boundaries, perambulation maps showing you exactly where the boundaries of the parish are. But I would be very surprised if those are the only, if those have survived. There's a high probability other records have survived within the parish. So they need to be looking further for that. And a good way of looking at is ask the county archivist. You know, I'm looking for the parish chest records for this parish. What has survived? Or look at the county archives website and do a search on that parish. But there should be more than just maps.
Okay. Okay, so we've got a little bit here from Ian. My fifth great-grandfather, David Todd, was a Presbyterian minister. He worked in St. Peter's Church in Soho, but ended up moving to Cranshaw's in Berwickshire. He is mentioned in the Fasti Ecclesi. Oh, I can't pronounce most of this. Yeah, you know what I'm talking about.
Yes.
But I know that some of the information is incorrect. Would there be more information within the chest records on where he studied or where he came from?
Well, I'm surprised that the Fasti doesn't indicate where he came from and where he was educated, because most Presbyterian ministers that are mentioned in the Fasti have that matriculation information there. So if he's in Soho, but he's Presbyterian, the question is he English Presbyterian or Scottish Presbyterian? He ends up in Scotland. There is a guidebook produced by the Society of Genealogists on my ancestor was a Presbyterian, dealing with the English Presbyterians. So that would be a guidebook I would certainly recommend looking at. I'd also go back and have another look at the fasties, because I'd be surprised if it's not in there. And it might be in abbreviated form. So look at the key at the beginning of the fasty, because the M would have been where he matriculated from, and that usually tells him the college. O would be where he was ordained, and then where he went to serve. So they're usually included in the fasty.
So back up a step and tell us about the fasty.
Okay, what the fasty is a multi-volume series of all of the a directory of all of the ministers in the Presbyterian Church, the established Church of Scotland, the Presbyterian ministers in the established Church of Scotland. And I say that because there are other branches of the church. Most of them were the big split in the Great Disruption in 1843, when the Free Church was formed, took a lot of those ministers out of the established church and put them elsewhere, still Presbyterian. And you have earlier successions in the 1700s that split off some ministers. But there are often fasty or directories for those ministers that went off into those other churches as well. And those are available freely on Internet Archive. And because of the title, the Scotiana, it's done multiple ways. So the way I find them is I do a search on fasty and then Hugh Scott. Hugh Scott is the author. So, and you will pick up multiple volumes, and they're organized by diocese. And within those dioceses, there's a directory for each minister and each church. So you can follow them from, if your interest is in one church, you can follow that church, or you can look in the index and you can follow them from call to call, from one church to the next. Very useful if you got Presbyterian ministers.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, look at all this. I'm testing your search stuff. Yeah, there's tons of these. Okay, good. Something new for me to learn.
It's a multi-volume set.
Yeah, since I have it, I'm going to go ahead and share the link in the comments. So give me just a second to do that, because it's hard to type and talk at the same time. Sometimes.
You can't do multiple things at once.
I don't always succeed. Not every time. How did you break your arm again? Okay, so there's a follow-up to that question actually from Anye. Says the fasty said he studied at St. Andrews University, but when I contacted them, they have no record of him. I do have his signature of him being ordained, but they have no information on where he studied either. And he was ordained at Kirkcaldy.
Okay, and where he was ordained would be generally the first call that he would be serving. So that would be the first at Kirkcaldy. Yeah, some of the universities have better records than others. Edinburgh and Glasgow have fairly decent sets of records. If they're in England, for Church of England, it's almost certainly Oxford or Cambridge, and unless it's mid to late 1800s. Anybody before that, it's going to be Oxford or Cambridge, and those records have all been published. the universities may still have, the universities or their colleges may still have additional information on them. So often they can be worth following up with to see if they've got more information. I know I've done that with a couple of them at Oxford in the past, and they've added a little bit more to my information. And generally, because we're genealogists, I've often added to their information about the person, like dates of death and that type of thing.
Yeah, actually, yeah, totally different topic actually, but I contacted a university in Ohio several years ago now about my, some collateral ancestors that went there, and they, in their alumni office, reached out to me and said, "What else do you know? Because we'd love to fill out our, our biography of all of our students from this period." And they were some of the earliest women to attend, and so they're like, what else can you tell us? So there was an exchange of information there that went on for several weeks actually.
Yep.
And we were
Nice.
believe it or not, actually, in letters, like in envelopes. Yeah, it was fun. Okay, Paul says, "Thanks for all this advice. I'm stuck in 1637 in a small village in Yorkshire. Hopefully the parish chest information is still available in the county record office." Hopefully, Paul. 1637 seems pretty early, though, in terms of surviving records.
Well, but a lot of the regulations creating these records were coming out of the 1500s, as part of the Reformation, and prior to the Civil War. The question becomes, did they survive the Civil War and the changes that went on there, which is the 1640s through 1642 through 1660.
Just occurred to me actually because of the time frame. Would this this policy of the parish chest would have followed some of the early colonialists into New England?
Yes. Yes.
Well, for those of us reaching out for our North American colonial period parish chest records, good. It's one more thing on my list. Okay, we've had a couple of questions around how to learn more, and you've already mentioned one book. And then there was a link shared to this one, which is one that I started to read, The Parish Chest by W.E. Tate, which Paul assured me is still a good copy. But what else do you recommend?
It's a very good one. I would recommend is Buried Treasures, What's in the English Parish Chest, which is my book on, it's my book. It's on the English Parish Chest. It's available as an ebook from Unlock the Past, which is an Australian company. And that uses a case study in there for the parish of Leeds in Kent, just to get a sample of what's there and what can the records be used for, and telling you about the laws that created the records. And that's one of the harder things to come by, which is why it's in the book, is, what are the laws that affected the settlement records, the bastardy records, the overseers' accounts? What were the requirements for keeping those records, and where did they interact with the rest of the government, like with taking court cases to the quarter session records? When did they go there, and when did they stay?
So important to understand that perspective of it, because
Yes.
you don't know why the records are created in the first place. You don't know what the opportunities are in terms of research now.
Right. And one that's maybe more readily available is Tracing Your Parish Ancestors by Stuart Raymond. In here, there is only one chapter deals with what we typically think of, which is the parish registers. Everything else in the book deals with the different types of records that you normally find in the parish chest. But this also puts it into social context. So this talks about the records, the laws, and how to use them. This talks about putting them into social context. And the book that you held up, Jen, on by Tate, is regarded as the standard reference book dealing with lots of examples from around the country of the depth of material that you can find dealing with the records and the case studies. But it's showing its age. It doesn't talk about modern finding aids, that type of thing, how to find them.
I think this is an 86 publication, something 83.
Yeah.
It's a reprint. So, yeah.
It's older than that, I think.
Original, I think you said was in the 60s. Oh, no. 1946 was the first. Yeah, it's getting up there, right?
Yeah. So it's not going to have modern finding aids discussed in there or published examples. If you're dealing with early records, you know, there was the example, somebody asked a question in Yorkshire for the 1600s. That's the type of record that you should be looking at the county record societies, because they've been publishing a lot of those early records. If I remember rightly, the oldest surviving parish chest materials is from a parish in Norfolk from the 1500s. In Devon, I think it's in the early 1600s. And they've been published by the county record societies. So it's worth looking at what has been published. You know,
yeah.
Do a search on WorldCat for that place.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. WorldCat's a great place to start. Deborah says, "I love how Paul just pulled a book out of the lake."
Yeah.
And, one of the responses was far cooler than pulling a sword out of the lake.
Well, I wish I could step back there and just pull out the Loch Ness Monster out of that lake, because that is Loch Ness, Quart Castle. So it would be nice to pull out the monster.
That was very funny. Okay, so Graham, on the topic of books, wants to know if there's a book or details for lay preachers. He says, my grandfather was a Methodist lay preacher around Chester and surrounding area in the 1900s up to about 1940s.
I'm trying to remember I want to say there's a book on Methodist, tracing Methodist ancestors. I think my ancestor was a Methodist in the Society of Genealogists series. And there was one produced by what was the Federation of Family History Societies. And I think that is now the Family History Partnership. So I would look at their catalog for Methodist ancestors. There is a website on tracing your Methodist ancestors. You know, do a search on tracing Methodist ancestors, because I know there are some websites depending on which branch of Methodists you were involved with. So it's worth looking there online as well.
Audrey commented that she thinks the Tate Parish Chest book doesn't go out of date precisely because it doesn't say anything about finding aids and those so fast, right? So there's, you know, and actually I was having this conversation with a completely different group of people on Facebook last week sometime that, you know, there's this implication, I think, in that people don't read anything unless it's modern and new and published new. But I actually find great value in reading texts like this because they don't talk about the internet. I love books that don't talk about the internet because I want to know how to find them, whether or not it's on the internet. And this book is going to tell me that because the internet didn't, right?
Yep.
To be thorough in our research and to make sure that our self-education is guided in a really comprehensive way. I think I kind of agree with Audrey and probably you too, that it's important to read materials from all different periods, right? Even if the book is 100 years old, right?
Yep. Yep. And in fact, those older writers, those materials published a long time ago, that because of their verbosity in many cases.
Yeah.
They tended to go into a lot more detail
Right.
about the records and providing examples, because people were open to that.
Yeah.
And they were often labors of love. And the nice thing is, a lot of them have been made digitally available on the Internet Archive once you figure out they exist.
Yes. Yes, exactly. Yeah. And this one, I mean, honestly, I just stumbled across it probably at a used book sale. That's where I get most of my stuff. So it was just one of those things that I, before I bought it, I actually had no idea who Kate was or the significance of this book.
Oh,
but
yes.
Then home and I looked up the book and I was like, okay, what did I actually just purchase for, $3.50 or whatever? Then I was like, oh, wait, great. I just got a really good deal actually, because
you did.
I definitely need to have this on my shelf. Yeah, so it's, a couple of years ago, a friend at Family Search actually kind of put out and said, I've got a box of books, about English and Irish research I don't really use anymore, and they're all older publications. Does anybody want them? And I was like, yeah. I'll take the entire box. It's my personal soapbox, I guess, for the last week. Read old.
Yes.
All the. Okay, sorry, I'm going back to questions. So, Lori asked, were there overseers accounts for Ireland? So that's a pretty specific question. So maybe it's a good time to kind of talk about, in general, give us kind of a sentence or two about some of the main categories of parish records, like what you would think would be the most common and the thing to know about that type of record.
Okay, so they're going to the parish is going to keep track of money. So the money coming in, money going out. So you're going to have the overseers accounts and you're going to have the church warden accounts. Slightly different functions, and the rules are not rigid in every locality. So, but just keep in mind, generally the church warden accounts are running the church, the building, the administration. The overseers are looking after the poor, the children, the orphans, those types of situations. So they're going to keep two sets of books. You're going to have the issue of settlement. And the settlement records, there's multiple types of documents that are created, and settlement examinations. And you like those examinations because they will give you their family history. Where did they come from? Have they done anything to claim settlement in a given place? Do they, and often the real reason you want them is because they tell you where they came from. And that's the big value of the settlement records. Whether they get to stay put or whether they get to be evicted and leave. So you've got those sets of records. You've got the whole issue of bastardy, illegitimate children. And by law, the mother was supposed to explain who the father was, designate who the father was. It didn't always work. And sometimes it was contested. Sometimes you got the shotgun weddings. Sometimes it went to quarter sessions when they didn't cooperate. But in all of the cases, it leaves a paper trail. Mm-hmm. Rarely do they name the child. So you've got to use other records like the parish register for baptisms, because the kid is usually still baptized, to find the actual name of the child. But if you know the name of the mother, then you can usually find them in the parish registers. Let's see, what have I covered? Settlement, bastardy, overseers accounts, church warden accounts. You'll often find lists of names, like in the late 1700s, early 1800s, you get a lot of lists of names for the militia, like who was eligible to serve in the militia, who actually served in the militia, or who paid for substitutes to serve in the militia. So you may get any one of those three lists surviving for the parish. What you want ultimately is the list who were eligible, because that's the longer list, before they pulled the name out of the hat to say, okay, it's your responsibility. You either go and serve in the militia or you pay for somebody else to serve in the militia. What else is there? I've seen everything from, you'll often get named in the minutes, the vestry minutes. You will get who gets named as the overseers, the church wardens, the parish constables, the officers in the church. And when you trace those, they're often the tradesmen or the farmers, the well-to-do farmers. I've seen names of people who have contributed to the renovation of the church. And there was a lot of that going on, certainly in the mid-1800s, mid to late 1800s, a lot of church renovations going on. And they would never dream of doing that nowadays, but they would obviously often publicize your name and how much you contributed to the fund. Can you imagine doing that in church now? No. Let's see, what else? Parish charities. There's a lot of those, certainly in the 17th century. People using their wills to set up a charity in the parish, to set up to have an almshouse built. I've got one of those on one of my ancestral lines in Berkshire, where the minister left money to set up an almshouse, and that almshouse is still there. Two cottages for the elderly women in the parish. And it's called Dixon's Houses, and the name and the date of the house is still on it, just down the street from the parish. So lots of records, but those are going to be the main ones. Did that answer the question, Jen?
Well, I mean, I think it answered my question at least. I mean, I think it's a good overview. The question specifically was, were there overseas accounts for Ireland? So we combine what you just said with what we talked about earlier in terms of geography, and we kind of build an answer. But if you want to summarize in a sentence.
Yeah, I think the Irish ones, it's worth looking for them. They're not, and you're going to probably have to look locally to find out if they've survived. Because they're certainly not talked about in the how-to books on Irish research. So if they have survived within the church, within Ireland, they're not a major source anyways, put it that way.
Okay. Patricia commented that her several times great-grandfather was a blacksmith, and she's found him sending invoices for doing repairs to the church gates. So that's pretty cool.
Yes. So you've got the issue with the tradesmen. They're often in the church warden accounts because they do things to repair the church. So you're going to be looking at the blacksmiths, the slaters, the the masons, the carpenters. Those middle tier tradesmen do jobs for the church.
Right.
But the church then turns around and recruits them as the officers of the church. So it's a two-way street at that level. That's why they're so valuable for that level in society.
Yeah, lots of comments about the bastardy conflicts and the legal discussions and things. Sylvia says that in her local town, a woman who refused to confirm the name of the father was punished by stripping her to the waist, tying her to a cart, dragging her to the town boundary and back. She had to be whipped and blood had to be drawn. This is early 18th century.
That's more common in Scotland because it's against the moral governance of the church, which was really strong in the Presbyterian church. Right. I haven't seen as many examples of that in the English church. But that doesn't mean to say it didn't happen, especially in that time period. Yeah.
Good. So we've got about 9 minutes. So I'm scrolling through to see what are the last comments and questions.
Okay.
Oh, and another comment from Sylvia. Actually, her favorite workhouse entry is the tobacco and beer and gin allocated to the elderly for their health. Like medical officer. I concur, except for the tobacco. Yeah, all good things that we find in these historic records. All right, it looks like the questions are kind of coming to an end, so just lots of story sharing, which is always wonderful. So please keep sharing, you guys that are out watching. It's always good to hear what you find in your research and your discoveries. We at Findmypast love hearing it. So please do share with us. Thank you for that. Paul, I guess, we've kind of cruised through most of my specific questions, but is there anything that we haven't talked about that you would think, this is something we haven't discussed that they really need to know about XYZ?
One of the other places I would look for these records is in the county family history societies, because many of those have been cooperating and doing projects to index some of these records. So, and a popular one is the settlement records, because the documents were created in 2 or even 3 locations and may have only survived in 1. And that may not be where you're looking at. So what they've done is created county-wide indexes, especially the settlement records, overseers accounts, bastardy records, because often those cross parish boundaries as well. And they may be indexing what's in the parish chests, and they may be indexing what's in the quarter session records. And the quarter session records often go later into the 1800s than the parish chest materials. So also look to see what has been published by the county family history societies, and contact the county archives to see what's available. And also check online at the commercial websites as well, to see what's being put online.
Where would we be without family history societies, really?
Right. They've been working a lot longer than the commercial websites.
Absolutely. Yeah, so Deborah actually has one last question. I think it's a good one, actually. We haven't really talked about languages. Were the pre-1733 records written in English or Latin, which was most common?
Yes.
Yeah.
Most of the records in the parish chest are going to be written in English. Most of them. And a good reason for that is many of the parish officers who were serving in the roles of parish officers would not have been able to write Latin.
Oh, sure.
Or read. Your ministers might have been able to do that, but they're generally not the clerks or the record keepers. It's the people in the parish that are keeping the records. So most of them are going to be in English. Now, invariably, the exception to the rule is going to be your parish.
Of course, yeah, of course. Yeah, that happens every time, right? And Lori asks, do the settlement records indicate immigration? Which is a great question.
Maybe. Because, well, the immigration, especially in the 1830s, there were a number of schemes around the country where the government was supporting emigration of the poor, especially to Canada, but also some to Australia and New Zealand, where they would have public meetings raise money within the parish, and then help people emigrate. And there may be lists of, I've seen the lists where they've called a meeting, lists where they've raised the money, and then lists of people they help support to immigrate and where they went to. So it is worth looking in the parish chest. Those records do exist, especially for the 1830s, because there was a nationwide scheme for that. Sorry?
I'm just going to now because I have something else I need to go research. Let that be my parish. That's really interesting. I don't think I'd ever heard about that before, but I mean, I've heard of government schemes, obviously, to get people to immigrate. I believe my guy was actually part of an army scheme in the same sense to get him to come into Canada instead of a pension.
Yeah.
Never considered the parish angle for that. So yeah, that's fascinating. Yeah.
Well, answering your question, I hope you've looked in RG8 at the Library Archives of Canada.
Yes, I have.
Okay.
Yeah.
Was he in the records?
There are, so to give everybody some idea of what we're talking about, I have an ancestor that I've been working on for a while now, and some of you know about him because I've talked about him in these sessions. John Lawrence, who theoretically was in the British Army and then ended up in Canada and then eventually New York and into lower states. And the story is that he served in the British Army and served in India, and that his father was a silversmith in Birmingham. Yeah. Yeah. So several weeks ago, months ago, I guess, I had emailed Paul actually with this little snippet saying, what do I do with this? How do I trace this down? So because he ended up in Canada, there's a collection at Library Archives Canada that refers to this time period. And there are 3 John Lawrences in that collection in particular, and I can't differentiate yet between the 3. So it's possible he's one of them, but I don't know for sure. Okay.
We got a couple of minutes left. Do we have any more questions sitting there, Jen? I don't want anybody to feel short-suited here.
Well, me either, but if people have questions, feel free to share them on the thread and we'll get back to Facebook and try to answer as many as we can. So keep in mind, everybody, that the discussion does not necessarily have to end at the top of the hour. But I don't see anything else, and I don't think Ellie has seen anything either. She hasn't flagged any for me. Remember, everybody, that we have Fiona Fitzsimmons talking about Irish research tomorrow, so that will be another great session. And then, of course, Findmypast Fridays. And I don't know who's doing Findmypast Fridays this week. Maybe Ellie can tell us before we end the call, but it's always a good week. Last week, I got to do it. They actually let me free on Friday, which was delicious. And we talked about the British East India Company. That was a lot of fun. Oh, yeah, okay. This actually was a question that I was thinking about before we started, and then I forgot. So Patricia says, specifically, what about Jews or Quakers living in the parish? And I guess the broader question is, what about other denominations?
Well, she's mentioning Jews and Quakers because they were the exceptions to the rules under Lord Hardwicke's Act of 1754. So specifically from 1754 to 1837, everybody except Jews and Quakers had to get married in the Church of England, no matter what denomination they are. So Methodists, Presbyterians, Baptists, Congregationalists, any of those other denominations, Catholics, they all had to get married in the Church of England, except Jews and Quakers. And the reason those 2 are the exceptions is because their record keeping is so good. Because, for instance, at a marriage in a Quaker ceremony, everybody signs the register to witness it. You know, everybody in attendance signs. So there's good record keeping there. So it depends on the time period you're looking at as to whether you've got to look inside or outside. But in terms of the parish chest, which we've been talking about, everybody could or should be included in those records, because that's the church in its civil capacity. That's the parish working to administer local government, not religion. So religion, whether they're Jews or Quakers, has nothing to do with it. So all religions should be mentioned somewhere in the parish records, in the parish chest materials. It's a good question now, and a good reminder.
Yeah, absolutely. So you'll appreciate this just right before we end. Billy Stone Fogarty's been watching.
All right.
She says, thanks, Paul and Jen. Very interesting. Next time, say yes sooner so she won't break your other arm. That's so fun. Everybody, this is one of the reasons I love genealogy. We're all just one big family, and we just appreciate each other and have a great sense of humor and such a good community. It's just...
Yes.
All right, so we did have one last question, that if you could tell everybody again what the image is behind you, because there's some people who missed it at the beginning.
Okay, it is a picture I took of Urquhart Castle on Loch Ness in Scotland, and I thought it was very appropriate there with the rainbow coming across onto the lake. It was a very nice day, but you can see by the clouds that the weather was intermittent, but when we were there, it was very nice.
I think that's true for like Scotland, like basically every day.
That's right. That's right.
There are a couple times, but yeah. All right, very interesting. Lots of thank yous and lots of learning lots, and hopefully all of you can take all this information and go explore a new avenue of research and potentially discover something new about your families and your records. If you do, please share it with us. We'd love to hear that these sessions are being productive and useful for everybody on that watches. So remember that you can always watch the recordings of these sessions via our Facebook page and our YouTube channel. So look to those if you want to watch it again, or if you found something that you missed and you want to catch up on. So please be sure to watch those. It is Alex this week on Findmypast Friday, so that's great. He always does a wonderful job. And I don't see, I'm scrolling one more time. I don't see anything else. So thank you very much, Paul, for being with us. We really appreciate it. This was a lot of fun. And always, there's just always so much to learn from you.
Thank you. Thank you, Jen.
So thanks everybody for watching. We're going to go ahead and call it a day, but do come back tomorrow for Fiona Fitzsimmons with Irish Research. She's wonderful and yes, incredibly talented. And in the meantime, take care of each other, stay safe, and be careful out there. And we'll see you soon back on our Facebook page.
Thank you.